When I drove the Jaguar F-Pace like 5 or 6 years ago when the model debuted, I will admit to having mixed feelings about it. I loved its exterior design and styling. I also loved its sporty driving character and on-road manners and surprising levels of comfort. But what I didn't like was its level of quality, especially inside. And I remember thinking back then that if this vehicle addressed these few things, it would become really popular. And in the year 2020, Jaguar did address the F-Pace's main problem, its interior. The British automaker gave it a very thorough facelift, especially inside, although the exterior is also different. And the resulting vehicle is miles better than before. I remember touching the door on the pre-facelift version of this, and the plastic felt rough and similar to what you might find in an economy car. And you could see some bits of the plastic molding that the door card came out of, for instance. It wasn't properly trimmed off, and that really bugged me. I also noticed that the stitching on the doors and the dash was a bit wavy. But now, with this facelifted model, all those problems are gone. The interior retains some elements of the old layout, but it's basically all new. And while certain bits of the architecture are familiar, it is definitely a much more plush feeling place than before. The infotainment in the old F-Pace wasn't especially good either. The menus were weird, the screen was laggy, and it didn't respond to touch impulses very well. And it really brought down the experience in an age when rivals from Germany had already, they didn't have a problem in this area anymore. All of their equivalent systems were far better than Jaguar's. But in 2020, the British automaker gave the F-Pace this brand new screen. It's an 11.4-inch screen, and it's amazing. I especially like the fact that it's slightly curved, but it's not curved like a widescreen would be to curve around you. This actually kind of curves around the dash. I'm not sure what the purpose is. Maybe it's ergonomics, but it's probably just looks, and it looks very, very fancy. It also runs pretty much the same software as the latest Land Rover and Range Rover product, and it is miles better than before. One of the biggest omissions of the previous Jaguar infotainment system was the lack of Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but now both of them are available and they are wireless. The infotainment is no longer a reason not to buy the Jaguar F-Pace. With the facelift, Jaguar also added a plug-in hybrid model, which pairs a 2-liter engine that makes around 300 horsepower, or just about 300 horsepower on its own, with an electric motor that's built into the gearbox, the 8-speed gearbox from ZF. It makes almost 400 horsepower. The battery pack feeding the plug-in hybrid powertrain has just over 17 kilowatt hours of capacity, and its usable capacity is around 13.5 kilowatt hours. According to Jaguar, this should give you a range of around 53 kilometers, that's 33 miles, which is still competitive with other vehicles in its class, and in fact, it actually surpasses the BMW X3 plug-in, but you shouldn't actually expect it to achieve its claimed range number. You can detract 10-15% to get the real-world value. Don't expect to achieve the claimed efficiency of around 2.5 liters per 100 kilometers. During my few days with this vehicle, with the F-Pace plug-in hybrid, I've been averaging around 10 liters per 100 kilometers. And this is of course because I didn't charge it. You can charge it up from 10 to 80% in around half an hour, and it does have DC fast charging. But I doubt that many owners will charge their F-Pace, to be honest. Around 10-ish liters per 100 kilometers, done mostly in town, is still a pretty good value for a vehicle which in plug-in hybrid guise weighs around 2.1 tons or over 2.1 tons. And now that we've slowed down, although we don't have that much juice in the battery, the vehicle kicked into EV mode. So as with any plug-in hybrid, if you charge this vehicle regularly, you will come close to achieving the claimed efficiency number. You can even exceed it if you have a very short daily commute where you mostly rely on the battery pack. So if you have like a 20-kilometer daily commute to your job and back home, you can say charge while you are at work. And if you do this every day, your vehicle's gas engine will hardly ever start. I mean, the F-Pace plug-in hybrid can drive on electricity alone at up to 140 kilometers per hour, or 87 miles per hour, rendering it very useful for commuting, even on the highway and at highway speeds. It's also worth noting that in the plug-in hybrid, the P400e trunk capacity is significantly reduced. And not only that, but the trunk floor is a weird shape. If you have smaller items in your trunk and you drive the vehicle for a while and they are not secured, they will all gather right behind the hatch, and when you open it, they will all fall out. You also lose about 150 liters of the non-plug-in hybrid's 650-liter trunk, so it is considerably smaller and less practical because it's weirdly shaped. Although you can fold down the rear seats 40-20-40 and you get over 1700 liters of space. With all of that being said, I think this plug-in hybrid powertrain's party piece is its performance. So Jaguar quotes this vehicle as being able to sprint to 100 kilometers per hour in a little over 5 seconds, thanks to its almost 400 horsepower and over 600 Newton meters of combined torque from its electric motor and gas engine, and four-cylinder gas engine. You have, of course, a drive mode selector, which is a bit laggy. I'm not sure why, so you twist the thing and you wait for like a second or more. It's not instant. It even says dynamic mode confirmed, and not immediately after you've twisted the knob. You still have to wait around just a little bit. Maybe it's a safety feature that I don't get, I don't know. So anyway, you put the vehicle in dynamic mode, you move the transmission selector into sport. You can also control the gears yourself through the paddles. And once you've done this, Jaguar deems it appropriate to pump in V8 exhaust noises through the back speakers of the 13-speaker Meridian sound system, which is optional, but we'll get to it. Let me just get on this secondary road and I will do a launch. I really want you to hear this V8. Wow! It reminds me of the Aston Martin DBX. It's a very, very quick vehicle, let me tell you. It feels quicker than the 5.3 second claimed sprint time would suggest. And now, as we approach this corner, I'm taking full advantage of the optional adaptive dampers that have firmed up. It really sounds like a V8. And it's really positive through the corners as well. One thing I will note though is that I think you actually sit higher than in most rivals in the F-Pace, even with the seat, of course, cranked all the way down, as I do. And you certainly feel this around the bends, that because you're further away from the roll center of the vehicle, any lean side-to-side motion of the vehicle is accentuated. And the seats themselves, even though this is the R-Design black trim level model, which is supposed to be a bit sporty, the seats don't actually have that much side support, and you are kind of tossed around in your seat. But that's because this vehicle is extremely good around the corners. It's probably the best vehicle in its class, at least from the ones that I've driven, and I've driven pretty much all of them. I remember that when I drove it a few years ago, 5-ish years ago when it was launched, this actually impressed me deeply. And I also drove the Jaguar XE around the same time, and I felt that it was much more agile and much nicer to drive than even a BMW 3 Series. I hadn't driven the Alfa Giulia at that time, but I have since, and I think I would still pick the Jaguar XE as my compact executive sedan of choice to take around a twisty mountain road. Second would be the Alfa. Third would be the 3 Series. And the thing is, in the XE's case, that was mostly down to its quite low weight. And even though both vehicles have a lot of aluminum in their construction, the XE was surprisingly light for a vehicle in its class. The F-Pace without the plug-in hybrid system and with just a 2-liter turbo engine weighs around 1.9 tons. So going for the plug-in hybrid, it adds around 200 kilograms. Although, to be perfectly honest, I don't feel this vehicle is cumbersome at all through the corners. It's really good. I really like it. And furthermore, when you take it out of sport mode or the dynamic mode and put it into comfort, it does lean through the corners when you are in comfort mode. So do take that into consideration, but it is never without agility. It's a very reassuring driving experience. It almost reminds me of the Aston Martin DBX that I drove last year, especially with that fake V8, very credible fake V8, I might add, noise that's played through the speakers. But the fact that I'm surrounded by lots of leather on the dash, on the doors, pretty much even on the glove box cover, I think, or they've managed to match the finish perfectly well. But it really reminds me of that vehicle. The driving experience, the experience of being on board, they are definitely similar. Certainly the Aston Martin feels a bit fancier, but it's also over twice the price, so it should. But this is not half the car. It really is not. In fact, I think it might be better around the corner than the DBX. Although the DBX is a more accomplished vehicle that is much more comfortable than this overall. I really like this interior. I really enjoy being a passenger in this vehicle or driving it. I like the new sporty steering wheel. It's not as thick as in a BMW or some other vehicles, but it's perfectly okay and sporty to hold. It doesn't detract from the experience because it's thinner rimmed. I also like the digital driver's display. It's still 12.3 inches, just like in the pre-facelift model. But the graphics seem sharper and it just seems better. It's up there with the best in class, certainly. I also like the new climate controls with the rotary things that you, for instance, you pull on the rotary control and you can adjust fan speed. And then if you push on it, you can adjust seat heating or cooling. My tester doesn't have seat cooling, but if it did, you would enable it by pushing and then twisting to the left. And even though the rest of the buttons are touch buttons, you can actually press on them, so just touching the symbols doesn't do anything. You touch the symbols and then the entire panel itself clicks. The R Black Pack makes a lot of the shiny exterior trim black. So you have the ornaments on the front fenders with the Jaguar logo, the Jaguar script, the E-Pace script, the P400e script, and a few other exterior ornaments are all finished in glossy black. And I have to say, it really looks good. Although for something, well, that is supposed to be classy and luxurious, classically luxurious even, like a Jaguar, maybe you could keep the chrome. This is the first vehicle that makes me consider keeping the chrome and not going for the shadow pack. We have a few more twists coming up, so I'm gonna put it in sport, gearbox in sport. I'm gonna try to shift gears manually. I will say that this 8-speed automatic gearbox from ZF, it is kind of reluctant to give you downshifts sometimes. It doesn't shift up for you, which is nice. Boy, this thing pulls. Let's just slow down a little bit. Another thing you can feel when you drive it quickly, especially over a bumpier road, is that the suspension actually has a lot of travel. And looking at the vehicle from the outside, you can really see it. It has over 21 centimeters of ground clearance. And I took it light off-roading yesterday, and I was actually never worried that I might touch anything. I got out of the car several times to check, and there was room to spare. That's good. I wasn't expecting to have fun. I never am. I never expect to have fun in an SUV. I might be biased against them, but I don't think that many are as good as the F-Pace to drive. I mean, I'm actually enjoying myself. And the mass, the huge mass, is disguised in this vehicle. You forget it weighs over 2 tons. It's pretty great, to be honest. And I'm not even sure why it hasn't become more popular. Maybe people were put off by the bad initial reviews that this vehicle was getting, because many reviewers were quite harsh when they test drove this. So the F-Pace was facelifted in 2020, and it's probably going to be around for another couple of years maybe. But the thing is, it's kind of late for the F-Pace to be successful, to be honest. I mean, even now that it's a very good and very competitive mid-size SUV, I don't see that many of them on the road, to be honest. People still just flock to buy, you know, X3s and the GLC. But I think this doesn't really rival them because it drives better than both of them. I think this rivals the Porsche Macan because it's these two vehicles in this class, the only two that feel like hot hatches on stilts. The X3 to a certain degree, but you feel more detached, believe it or not, in the BMW than you do in this. Not that you want to do that in a big, heavy and tall SUV, but you can. And there's less chance to make friends with a tree when you drive it quickly, just because it feels more planted. So the F-Pace starts at around 50-something thousand euros. My tester, with all of the options that it has on it, is 98,000 euros. So yeah, it's quite expensive. But I actually think that unlike the pre-facelift model, this vehicle almost justifies it. I mean, you don't feel like you are being shortchanged. Every surface you touch is nice, the sound system is nice, the seats are great, even though they are not especially sporty, as I said. The ambiance is one of quality and British luxury. It even says here above the climate control things, Jaguar Coventry, established in 1935. Yeah, it's definitely good. Although, to be fair, it doesn't really matter. And that's because Jaguar as a brand is going through a major overhaul. In the company's quest to become a viable manufacturer of electric vehicle, it is not going to directly replace any of its existing models, if you can believe it. It's going to start fresh with its entire lineup. So once its current crop of models are phased out, they will not be replaced with something similar or on the same platform. In fact, Jaguar was developing a bespoke EV, its second bespoke EV after the I-Pace, and that was going to be a replacement for the XJ. However, they canceled that project midway through. We had already seen camouflaged prototypes, and it was clearly being tested. And people were making speculative renderings, guessing what it might look like. But we never got to see what it could have looked like, because under a new CEO, Jaguar pulled the plug on the XJ. And we're not even sure there's going to be a new XJ at this very moment. That was a very radical and hard to explain decision, to be honest. But the reasoning behind it is sound, and that's because, well, in its quest to out-German the Germans, Jaguar has failed. And I say this with a heavy heart because I really am a fan of this brand. I mean, I'm a fan of their heritage. They've made some of the most iconic and beautiful cars. So I really hope that its new electric vehicles will be as successful as the brand hopes they will be and needs them to be. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel if you've not done it already, and I'll see you in the next one.